Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Jazz Ideas. I'm really excited to get back into doing these. And the impetus for this one is I wanted to take a little look at Paul Desmond's solo on Wintersong. Many of you may know that I have a new book coming out this spring, actually two new books. One is a compilation of all the etudes from both Bach Shapes books, and the other one is Bach Shapes Two, which is twice the length of Bach Shapes One. Is going to have a ton of stuff in it, including this solo transcription from Paul Desmond called Wintersong. Wintersong is a really great track off of one of the albums with Gerry Mulligan, and it's based on These Foolish Things. So I wanted to take a look at this because I put this in the book because while it's not explicitly Bach related, it ties in a lot of the ideas that I have about using these types of phrases and motifs over changes. And it's a really perfectly constructed solo. So there's a bunch of things as I sort of look at my bullet point list that I created as I was analyzing this solo the other day. There's a bunch of things that he touches on, and some way more than others. The number one thing is motivic development. This whole solo is take a motive, see how far you can go with it, and then switch motives and do another thing. And that's a trademark of Paul Desmond. Number two is voice leading. So one of the ways he carries through those motives is by taking a little shape and changing each note to match the chords as they pass by, or imposing new chord harmony things over the existing rather basic harmony. Since this is sort of a 1-6-2-5 diatonic much of the time, he'll impose chromatic movement, or he'll put dominant chords where they're minor chords, or at one point he actually goes into a minor tonality, which is something that Dave Brubeck would do a lot too with the group, so it's probably borrowed, since at this point he had been playing with Brubeck for quite a while. The other thing is blues, and we'll touch on these as they come. What I'm basically going to do is break down each line of the solo, or see how far I get before I'm worn out. So blues, Bach split voice type lines, and we'll point those out as they come up. Minor tonicization, which I just mentioned. Bop scales, not a lot, but here and there. Use of tensions, chord notes, colorful chord tones, or colorful tensions. Chromatic approach, again, not as much as the other things on this list, but there is some. And quotes, and see if you can spot where the quotes are. And there's probably some quotes in here that I missed that you may hear and I won't. So I'm going to play little snippets and kind of talk about them as I go. One more thing, superimposed triads. So I've done a Jazz Ideas. I think one of the first 3 episodes was this little line that Paul loves to do on a turnaround. All right, let's get started. So here's line 1. And he starts off right away hitting a tension that's kind of unusual at the beginning of the solo. And now I'm already into the next motive. So let me stop there. Right in the first measure, he's hitting this F sharp, Lydian, on a C major, so it's a F sharp in my key and Paul's key. So I'll keep talking in transposed throughout this video. So you hear the F sharp. Now we also hear a shape happening. It's like this little dabba-dabba-dabba-dee, dabba-dabba-dabba-dee, dabba-dabba-dabba-dee. He's starting right off with a rhythmic and intervallic shape. There's one more colorful note there that you probably heard is the D sharp, making that G7 augmented, which is beautiful. Now we're going to head into this other motive that keeps coming up, and this sounds like a fugue theme from Bach, maybe this one. Or it's probably a more specific one that I can't think of right now. But anyway, it's getting that idea across. And if you listen to a lot of old earlier recordings of Brubeck and Desmond, they go into sort of fugue mode often, where one of them would kind of improvise a fugue theme and then carry it on. And I've done some videos on that already, so you can check those out. My video on the Brubeck Octet mentions that. So here's the motive on the second line. There. It's taking that da ba ba rhythmic and intervallic shape, even though the intervals aren't the same, and carrying it colorfully through the harmony, hitting that B flat, hitting that D flat, flat 9 on the C7 that leads into C. And I've also sort of pointed out in the analysis, in my own analysis here, that there's sort of a downward line. All these voice leading notes that are carrying through, whether they're in the middle of the line or the top or the bottom. Then he resolves it in a more jazzy way by putting that triplet in there. And we're on. Let's keep going. Another little shape. Let's keep going. It keeps going with that motive. Still carrying on that same motive. Let's go on from there. Here's a new one. Beautiful, just carrying up the chord tones. And by doing that, he's grabbing the third and the fifth on the D minor, and then going down and sort of voice leading that same triad into the G triad. Triads always sound a little more classical, and Paul loves triads, whether they're matching the chord symbol or whether they're kind of creating tension against the chord symbol. I'm going to go from the beginning of that line. Really gets a lot in there with arpeggiation and ends on that sharp 5 again on the G7. Here's a really nice example of G minor triad, sort of. You can see the sevenths in there too, going down to an A triad, which resolves down to a C triad. So these notes aren't in chromatic order, but he's voice leading them in their inversions, so they do match up that way. So he's connecting the C sharp of an A triad, which, by the way, is over a C7. And this is that same sound that I was talking about earlier. It's a triad starting on the 6th degree of a dominant chord. And he uses this all the time, especially on 6-7. And that grabs the 13, the flat 9, and the 3rd. And then he resolves it downward to the F, which the C7 resolves to anyway. Goes back to A7, where it is an A7. So let's connect all that now from G minor. Now I'm going to D7, and this is where some bop scale comes in. Augmented again all the time. And then now going into the bridge, he takes this little motive. There's that motive from earlier, da ba ba, right from the second line. And it just keeps tumbling one motive into another. So he had that motive from earlier. It grabbed all these beautiful chord tones. Then he puts this F sharp triad over basically what's an A7 or C sharp diminished here. Same sound. It's that triad built on the 6th degree. But he doesn't stop there. He resolves it chromatically to D minor with a sort of F major 7 voicing of it. And an E major 7. And then keeps that shape going into the C major 7. It's that same sound, the 6th degree sound. E major triad over a G7, same thing. Now let's take this motive and keep going. resolves resolves out of it in this kind of climactic way by making it busier and resolving it into a new idea. Bebop. Now we're into the second chorus. There's already been so much melodic material. I haven't heard any quotes yet, but maybe you have. Now we're going to take this motive and squeeze more notes out of it. I love that one. Played it wrong. Let's try it again. Just resolving this 3-note shape, open voicing, sort of a fifth, third, fifth again, or fifth, third root, depends on which chord you're on, but he keeps the same shape and just resolves it downwards. And you can hear that same descending line. If I even go back to the beginning of the second chorus, it's this whole descending thing. I'll play it all together. So that's the first line, E, G, F, E. And now I'm going to go B, B flat, A flat, G. Even though there's notes in between, I get to that G eventually. Augmented. D7 with this nice little shape here. Now we're getting into a couple things. So we had chromatic approach, bebop, and now we have a G7 that ends in a blues phrase. But now that he's played that minor third, the blue note, over a C major, he sticks with that, and now we're in a minor key. He's superimposing C minor over C major. And now he's going to put sort of a D7 flat 5 sound. Everything's very C minor now. Major. And so on top of all that, there's this constant chromatic descending line from F sharp down to C sharp. Sorry, it goes down to C and then works its way back up. Blues and bebop. Mostly blues. Now we're into the next bridge. It's a quote. So we finally have our quote, at least the first one I recognize explicitly, and that's "The night has 1,000 eyes." That's such a beautiful line. Beautiful. G, F sharp, F, resolving sort of to the flat 9 of what is an imagined E7 here, but I have it as E minor in the lead sheet. So that's all over E7, 6-7. Carrying the motive up to fit the changes and to build excitement. And then we go on. Just grabbing all the pretty notes, like Lester Young said. Grab those pretty notes. So there's tensions. Very Debussyan Reveille there with the flat 9, even the 4th, and it's leading into the G7, but we're already into the G7 sound here. And then we go on to the last A section. There's one of those motives we had earlier, and here it is again. It's like sort of a "isn't it romantic" phrase. Displacing where that phrase starts in the beat, maintaining interest. Now here's an interesting phrase. A lot of tension here by getting that F sharp sound over a C7 basically, even though we're still in the G minor here. Resolving the 7th to the 3rd. Repeating the motive almost as is, but grabbing all the right notes. Really getting that 7th to the 3rd that's coming up so much in my Bach Shapes book. He's really resolving it like Bach would. So here from the G minor again. Actually, I'll go back to that chromatic line, which was interesting. I didn't mention chromaticism, so there's some chromaticism here. Kind of like what Lester Young would do, little descending minor thirds. Let's go back to the D minor. Gets one last motive in there. It's just carrying on these little motivic ideas. Anyway, so there's so much in this solo, which is why I just basically plopped it in as is into the book. I urge you to practice it. I think it is all up on my blog. If not, I'll make sure it's up there. I did a few articles on Paul Desmond, some for the best sax site ever and some just for my blog. So stay tuned. There's going to be so much more to talk about. I will see you in the series. I'm going to try and do these every week again. So thanks again for watching.